We try to create experiences for our customers and our consumers. But there are times in our lives where experiences are created for us.
Hey, dog.
Hey, Elise, how are you?
You think about the major events in our lives, there's always an amazing food experience tied to it.
Good morning.
It's what brings people together. And that's where people get to share their beliefs about who they are and what they stand for. There are neighbors, there are friends, different cities, different communities.
You know, when we come together, we can make a better world.
A whirlwind of a person who's not going to take no for an answer.
There was only one greatest generation, and, I admire those guys so much.
I was truly amazed at how kind the world could be.
These are stories that absolutely have to be told.
I think it's something that we really need.
It's about what we can do for others. That's powerful.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jeff Baker, and I'm Group Vice President of Hormel Deli Solutions Group. I am joined today by Ethan Waters, who's an award-winning writer, also been involved with several of the other stories you've been hearing this week. Thanks for joining us, Ethan.
Great to be here.
We also have an award-winning filmmaker, Scott Belserek, with us today. Scott played a key role in bringing us the moving story that you're about to see. Welcome with us, Scott.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So today's film is one that I think is just truly remarkable, and we're so looking forward to sharing with you today. But I want to start by saying that Hormel Foods has always had a special place in our hearts for our veterans. Our history for supporting military veterans dates all the way back to 1898. Just 7 years after the company was founded, George Hormel gave $10 as a show of support and promised a job and full benefits upon return to 3 employees who enlisted during the Spanish-American War. And among those 3 enlistees was his brother, Ben. Then in 1917, the company joined the effort as World War I erupted out in Europe. And George's son, Jay, was the first enlisted man from Minnesota to report for service at Camp Dodge, Iowa, as a member of the 351st Infantry. And everyone is well aware that our support really ramped up during World War II. As Hormel Foods shipped up to 50 million cans of meat per week overseas, which was mostly the iconic Spam lunch and meat brand. Our support and respect for the service and sacrifices of these veterans and their families continues to this day. I think it's also important to note that from the earliest days of our company, George also understood the value of the unique leadership experiences of our military veteran employees, their ability to make decisions under duress, and certainly the shared values they brought to the culture and the mission of his young company. And I will say personally, as a veteran of the United States Air Force, I am incredibly proud to work for a company that is considered to be a top employer for military veterans, thanks to our recruiting practices, our culture, and our generous policies related to veterans and their families. Now, we receive a lot of honors and accolades for the work we do, but when we actually have the opportunity to connect with inspired fans of our company who happen to be veterans, well, that's very special to all of us. And that's the case when we received a fascinating note from Mr. Mike Crisp, who wrote us to tell about a special group of veterans, but I'll say heroes in every sense of the word. Mike wrote to tell us how this group, representing all 5 branches of the military, gather every week at a restaurant in Northern California. And the distinguished ambassador of the group is Chuck Baker, a legendary B-17 Flying Fortress pilot who recently turned 101 years old. Now, these veterans joke that the only thing they have in common is our beloved Spam brand, but we believe their commonalities and their bonds run much, much deeper. I'm looking forward to our panel discussion today, but first things first, I'm proud to present the premiere of Chuck Baker's Table of Honor. Gene, let's roll the film.
We try to create experiences for our customers and our consumers. But there are times in our lives where experiences are created for us. It is just an amazing story.
This all started thanks to Gordon, our friend here, who is at Safeway.
I was reaching up to pull a can of Spam off the top shelf, and a voice behind me said, "So which branch of the service were you in?"
We were all in different services, all at different times, but this is the one thing we all have in common.
Yeah, so here we are. Speaking of the devil.
That Chuck?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see
Hello,
you.
Chuck.
Good morning. How are you?
What a grip.
Man, good.
His hands are cold, but yours are nice and warm.
Chuck had been a B-17 pilot in World War II and flown several missions, so powerful to see a real hero.
Our missions were 8-9 hours long. Go to Munich, it was 10 hours. It was 40 degrees below zero at 25,000 feet. We didn't have electric suits. And I put my hands right like this, and that's the way that's the way I kept warm. The mission to Schweinfurt, Germany, 60 of our bombers went down. That's 600 young men. That's 600. But tomorrow the sun shines, we fly. And the day after that, and the day after that.
There was only one greatest generation, and, I admire those guys so much.
maybe we could open that Spam.
Somebody heard us. There you go. I know what I want.
Oh, look at this.
Oh, Chuck Special.
Spam eggs.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Oh, my.
I'm up.
So 4 Chuck Specials, overeating these
You're famous, see? This is a guy that for his 100th birthday went skydiving. So living on the edge, right? We live on the edge through Chuck.
I used this parachute last month.
Okay, that one's gonna work.
Yeah,
I heard you took a jump recently.
Yeah.
How was that?
It's great.
Okay, that's gonna work.
It's going to be an annual affair with me.
Oh, all right.
After I get my 102nd birthday. I'm sure everybody in the air, when they got into very difficult things, had some kind of a talisman. They had a rabbit's foot, or they had a picture of their girlfriend, or whatever. And I resorted to the Holy Bible. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil. That was very comforting. It was my help.
That's amazing. This is a special moment.
The whole United States got behind the war effort, everybody. We were a very cohesive nation. That's the way it was. I think it's something that we really need. You got me through.
Wow, that was a spectacular movie. It makes me so incredibly proud to be an American and certainly humbled to be able to meet these heroes right now. So joining us from California are Mike Crisp, who served in the Coast Guard, Don Byrne, U.S. Navy, Justin Berglund is our Marine, Gordy Russell served in the Air Force, and the guest of honor from the Army Air Corps, Mr. Chuck Baker. Now, gentlemen, it's welcome to our call today. It's my understanding that this is the first time you've all seen each other since the coronavirus actually closed your restaurant. Is that true?
True.
Pretty much.
Right.
So just checking in to see, is everybody in the group still healthy?
Are you still healthy?
So far, so good.
Great. That's great to hear.
I'm still healthy.
Yes.
I'm in 100% healthy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I have absolutely no problem.
Hey, Mike, I'm curious if you were surprised when you were the instigator of this whole thing. You sent a picture to Hormel. I'm just curious what you expected the reaction to be, compared to what all happened.
Well, I knew we had a good story. What I was surprised about was how quickly Hormel responded. Of course, the story wouldn't be a story without Chuck, but 5 of us hit it off pretty well. And to this day, we still enjoy each other's company when we're able to get together.
I'm curious what the other veterans here thought of the film. Anyone, what were your reactions to the final product? Justin?
I thought it was terrific.
You know, I like Chuck and his comments, what he did when he was flying. I thought that was really interesting.
I think about you guys, we shot this film before the coronavirus and the pandemic started. And when we were talking to you, both for the article and the film, we talked a lot about the nation coming together during the Second World War and your impressions of that generation. And I've been thinking about that since then, because obviously we have a national crisis now. And I wish, I hope people see this film and think on that, because I feel like the national unity that you guys remember, as some of you as kids during the Second World War, and certainly Chuck, we could use that now, that sense of national unity. And so I've been thinking about that.
Have you found ways to stay in touch while you're not able to meet at the restaurant? Are there still some ways you can stay in touch, maybe through Zoom or through a phone call, just to keep that camaraderie going amongst your group?
Pretty much. I've been on the phone with both Gordy and Don, and Chuck and I email back and forth, and so did Justin. So yeah, there is some connection that stays here. And of course, with this Hormel video presentation, we've all been in touch. So you're helping us keep connected.
That's wonderful.
Hey, Scott, I want to ask you about how you approach this film, but I want to take just a second to brag on you a little bit. Scott is the filmmaker that's been responsible with his creative partner, Dave Monroe, for many of the films in the film festival this week. This is just one of the projects he was involved in. Remarkable filmmaker. But I'm curious, just approaching this film and these veterans, I'm curious about just the artistic process of like figuring out how to present these stories. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, it was nice to get a lot of leeway from Hormel for creating just an authentic story. And we spent a lot of time with those guys as much as we could. And I think slowly over the time that we interviewed them, sort of collectively gathering all their experiences and sort of putting it into this, whatever 4 to 5 minute film was a challenge. But at the same time, there was so much great stuff that speaks to what's going on right now, and particularly just to echo what you said, Ethan, that I think that in the end, it came together quite easily because these guys had been through it and had so much experience, and it was sort of an honor for me to tell their stories, as best I could.
Right. There were so many stories, so much tape is collected for a short film like this, and there's so many stories we did not get to share. I guess maybe Chuck, one of the stories that you told us that was not part of the film happened years after your service at a ski resort where you met, you were on a ski lift with a German gentleman. Could you tell us that story briefly?
Do you remember the story of the German gentleman that you met on the ski lift?
Yeah.
Could you tell them that story, please?
Oh, okay. My wife and I were skiing in Austria, and we got on one of these 4-person gondolas, where you're knees to knees and eyeballs to eyeballs to the opposite couple. And halfway up the lift, he was speaking German and he could speak a little bit of English. So he and I were the same age, and I said, were you ever in the military? And he said, yes, he was. And I said, well, where'd you serve? And he said, I was a Berlin flank gunner. And I said, oh, I visited Berlin 5 times. And I said, you must have tried to shoot me down. You're no good. You missed me. Well, it was a sad day. It was a miserable, snowy day, and we got up the top of the hill, and there was a little bistro up there, and he said, well, let's go on in and have a schnapps. So we went in, and we chatted, and about every half hour we'd go out and put our finger in the air, and it was still snowing. So he and I became pretty close during that day. We went to dinner with he and his wife that evening, and then we parted. He lived in Berlin, I lived here, and we would correspond back and forth by letters. That was before video, before computer. And he finally passed away, but it was an interesting day that we spent.
But I also heard a great story, or a part of a story about some sonar buoys being dropped that maybe had something special inside them. I'd love to hear the rest of that story.
Well, what was that?
It was about some buoys being dropped.
Was that Gordy? Was that Gordy?
Yeah, it's for.
No, it's not. Can you
Say
hear me?
that again?
I missed what we were dropping.
Did that story come from Gordon?
No, that was Don.
That was Don. Let's hear it, Don.
Don is currently.
I'm trying. I'm just not sure whether
There you go.
everybody's hearing me. Give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay. I was in patrol aviation in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam conflict, and we were flying patrols all over the Pacific, and mostly in the Vietnam area, but occasionally we would fly out of Alaska. And the object coming out of Alaska was obviously to fly over to Russia to see what we could see. We were out on a patrol one day, and we got a signal that indicated there was someone painting us with their radar. And so we hung a right, and we went down the beam, and there was a Russian submarine on the surface. And one of our objectives in a situation like that was to drop a sonobuoy into the water behind the submarine and record his signature as it was transmitted into the water. So we did that. We flew away. About halfway out, we noticed that he'd made a U-turn, and he was obviously going back to pick up the sonobuoy. But we had his signature, and he had our sonobuoy, and it was basically a Cold War situation, so everything's fine. About a month later, we were assigned the same patrol, And my flight engineer came to me before that patrol and said, "Mr. Byrne, what we'd like to do is put a bunch of girly magazines into a sonobuoy container and give those guys a thrill." So we did that. And sure enough, at about the same position, we got his radar paint on our airplane, flew down the beam, opened the main cabin door, and dropped the sonobuoy container behind the submarine. And as you might guess, he made a U-turn. We went on our patrol. About maybe 3 or 4 hours later, we were coming back and we got painted again. And so we flew down his radar beam, and looked like about half the crew of the submarine was in the superstructure, what we call the sail, and they were waving these magazines at us and applauding what we had done. And there's a kicker to this story. About 20 years ago, I was on a Black Sea tour with some friends, and we went to Balaclava, which is where the Russians kept their submarines, one place. And the docent was touring us through this part of the submarine exhibit, and she told a story about this airplane that had dropped magazines to the submarine crew, and I was very happy to take credit for that.
Global relations, right?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
You're muted there, Ethan.
Yeah. Ethan, you're muted.
I'm muting?
Chuck, Chuck, you had plans before the coronavirus thing took over to do another parachuting adventure on your birthday, and I believe some of your friends here were maybe going to go with you. Is that who was volunteering to go with Chuck on the? Well,
That would have been Mike.
It was.
Are you still planning to do that when the coronavirus gets lifted?
Virus is over. Yeah, as soon as the virus is over, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Scott, are you willing to go as a filmmaker on a parachute adventure with the?
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Careful.
Reunited with those guys, yes.
It's remarkable. I'm curious more about, like, having spent a couple of breakfasts with you guys, it seems like every breakfast you get a little more of the story out of Chuck's experience during the Second World War. You hear some of the same stories again, but you get another little detail. I'm curious just what it's almost like an experiment in living history, that you get a little extra sense of what he did during that time. And you guys seem really interested in learning that and sort of making a personal record of that. I'm just curious what those conversations are like.
Well, Justin has heard them all, so he could probably tell you. But Chuck wrote a book, and it really is an exciting read for all of us. We passed it around, so all of us have read Chuck's book, and it's filled with great stories and great background of the greatest generation.
What's the title of that book?
What's the title of your book?
It was entitled Memories, and it was just the memories of my military experience.
Is it around here somewhere?
It's what?
Is it around here somewhere?
Oh no, yeah,
we got
it right there.
Right by the.
Oh, he's got it right here.
Yeah, there, right there.
Yeah, we'd love to have the opportunity to read that.
I just made 50 copies, and just for family, and so it's just my experiences in the military. I was in
they called the B-17 the Flying Fortress. Can you remember some experiences that you had that would reinforce the name Flying Fortress for that aircraft? I mean, I've seen photos of some of the aircraft limping back to the airfields. It's just incredible. But have you had some experiences as well?
What made it a flying fortress, the B-17? Why did it get that name? And what experiences have you had that speak to it as being a flying fortress?
Well, when I went in the Air Force, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I read stories about World War I fighter pilots, and that's what I wanted to be, a fighter pilot. But when I went into aviation cadets, they said, we need bomber pilots. And I just wondered why. Why do they need more bomber pilots? So anyway, I went 1 year of aviation cadet training to become a bomber pilot. And as soon as I gathered a crew, we went to England and we flew out of England tight bases. And the B-17 was just a wonderful airplane. It could take all kinds of punishment. We lost engines and windshields and wings. A couple of times my main spar, my wing was broken. And but we survived. We survived.
And I'd encourage everybody who's watching this today to go back and take a look up Google B-17 and look up some of the incredible photos of that aircraft and what it was able to do and how important it was to World War II. Incredible, just incredible. And heroes flying in those aircraft.
And Chuck, you flew how many missions in total?
How many missions? 35 missions.
35.
When I arrived in England, a tour of duty was 25 missions. And about 1 in 3 would, 2 and 3 would complete their 25 missions. We got to 24 and they said, oh, we need more bombers. So your tour of duty now is 30 missions. So we got up to 29 and they said, your tour of duty now is 35 missions. So it was 35 missions. And so I would think that 1 in 3 would not complete the 35 missions. We were fortunate.
Right. And you had one particularly bad mission. Could you tell us about the one mission where you lost, I think...
No, you say one bad mission.
No. Right. So you had, as a group, you had one particularly bad day.
You want me to talk?
Do you want to?
All right. This one mission was, oh my, there were so many that I could relate to, but take one. Magdeburg, Germany, which is in the Ruhr Valley, a big production factories. Our escort was circling us, and all of a sudden they disappeared. And apparently, German decoys were out to the side, and so our escort went after the German decoys, leaving us absolutely unprotected. And suddenly, about 75 Messerschmitts attacked us head on. They went through us, knocked down my right wingman, another airplane right behind us. They made about 4 attacks on us back and forth. We survived that day, but the many that in my squadron didn't survive. At the mess that evening, it was very somber, very somber. Guy sleeping next to me didn't arrive home. Guy sleeping across from me didn't arrive home. It was very somber, but that was one of 35. Well,
it's amazing.
So Justin, I have a question for you. It seems like this group has become more than just table mates, right? There's more to it than that. Can you kind of describe what has this group grown to mean to you and to be with part of this team?
Well, the biggest part is that we've been getting together with Chuck approximately 16 years. Every Thursday, and there's about 4 or 5 that get together in that group. And we hear many of Chuck's stories, maybe the first, second, and third time. And Chuck is the main part of the lunch or the breakfast, and always happy to hear the stories again. Sometimes they change a little bit, and we ask him about that. And sometimes they are the same. But Chuck's is a great storyteller, and he does a great job in relaying what he did in the service. And when he got through with his 35 missions, Chuck will tell you what he wanted to do when he came back to the States.
When they came back to the States, well, I wanted to do a second tour of duty in the fighter aircraft. And about that time, my soon-to-be bride said, you have completed your tour of combat. You are eligible to come back home. And either you come back home or forget it. I didn't do a fighter, but I came back to Texas and taught aviation cadets. And then following the discharge from the military, I remained in the reserve for another 17 years. And I flew, made application to the airlines, and I flew with United for a couple, 3 years before I went into business myself. So that's my history.
Anybody else want to comment about what this group has meant to you as personally?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. My dad landed at Normandy, and I don't know if I'm coming through here, but I'll continue until someone stops me. And was probably on the beach when Chuck was flying overhead, headed for Berlin. Dad was just entering Europe as a captain in the army. So of course I think about that a lot, but knowing that there's a connection there with Chuck makes every meeting I have with him, moments that we get to share together, more meaningful. Who knows whether or not B-17 at 5,000 feet went bombing across the coast of France when Dad was landing.
Don, tell me about that snazzy cap you're wearing. Where'd you get that? Yes, sir.
Well, I was over at Chuck's house, and one of your emissaries was there with hats and shirts and other things as we gathered to begin the film, I guess. And I'm kind of surprised that my mates don't have their hats on. I like the hat. I get some comments on it when I'm in Safeway shopping.
It is amazing. It is amazing. I wear a lot of spam gear off and on, and it's amazing. It is a conversation starter everywhere you go. If you're wearing spam gear, and you can instantly tell if someone's from the military, they'll instantly make that connection. So it's fascinating.
And I'd like to compliment you guys on the new packaging for spam. When I was a kid, we had, of course, my dad was in the military, we ate spam. And the can was had a little key on it. You had to crank the key around to open it up, and then you plopped it into a plate and sliced it up and put it in the frying pan. But the can was dangerous. I mean, it was a weapon. And now you've got a much better packaging idea, and I appreciate that. Thank you to Hormel.
Very good.
Very good. You know, I also think about your guys' group when I think about the difficulties some veterans have on coming home and reintegrating into society. And And I think groups like this and having connection between other veterans, even if you were in different services at different times and had different experiences, seems like a critical component for mental health of a veteran coming back home. And I don't know, I don't think people thought about this as much during the Second World War. I think people coming home from Vietnam thought about this more. I don't know, Don, maybe you could speak to that. That I think it's a critical thing for people to have social groups that they can connect with, that can understand what they went through.
Yeah, just to backtrack a little bit in time, when I was in high school, the two most popular shows on television were Men of Annapolis and The Long Gray Line. Shows that took place at Annapolis and also at West Point. And my dad was retired military, and we were an honorable family, and we loved the country, and the country was definitely together. As my experience in the military grew with Vietnam conflict, that changed. And maybe a silver lining on this virus is in that this is a transformational moment for the country. Maybe we will recover from where we are or where we have been. It was an honor. It still is an honor to have been associated with the military. And I appreciate having an opportunity to say that. I think Chuck a lot when he comments about how we were one country at that time and how great it was to be part of that one country. That's not where we are today.
But right, Gordon, we have you on the phone.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to ignore you, but do you have thoughts about the meaning of this group or on that topic of the need for veterans to find community after service?
Yeah, first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm supposed to be eating Joe's Scramble right now.
That's right, it's Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday.
It's Thursday. This is our meeting day. Now, we all take something different, I'm sure. In so many ways positive from our experience that for me, my intention when I got out of college and the reserve, the ROTC, was obviously when I opted for the Air Force, and it was intent to go and fly airplanes, and as Chuck did, although it was peacetime, 1955, when I graduated from college. What happened was that after 4 years of ROTC and college, they figured out that I had hay fever, and so I couldn't go to flight school. So I ended up at the Armament Electronics School at Strategic Air Command. And for the next 3 years, my world was on various bases, supervising, really managing the electronics technicians and the armament, the weapons people in our bomb wing. It turned out that for a history major, and most people ask, I spent my entire life in the electronics world in various ways. It's been very good to me. And people ask me, what's your background? I said, well, I have a bachelor's degree in history. So if that doesn't say you should be grateful to the United States Air Force and the military, then so my takeaway from the Air Force, aside from all the disciplines and comradeship that I experienced, was that it gave me a vocation.
Right.
Incredible. Well, incredible stories. We are obviously very inspired and honored to know each one and every one of you. And Thank you for your incredible service. I know that before coronavirus hit, we had planned to be part of Chuck's 101st birthday parachute adventure, and we still hope to do that with all of you, and hopefully I'll have a chance to jump with you as well if we can coordinate that. But given Hormel Foods' longstanding commitment to the military, we did decide to create a special opportunity for veterans, just like these gentlemen, these heroes have done, to connect and share a common bond over a meal, because food can be so inspiring. And we were just getting ready to launch that effort when COVID-19 began and closed the restaurants, obviously. And we have a deep and powerful food service division with a lot of connections. And as soon as restaurants are open and people are allowed to dine together again, our plan is to look for restaurants that are willing to set aside a table 1 day per week to allow for veterans to come together and get to know each other. And we're calling it the Table of Honor, and it is a salute to our 5 distinguished veterans that are on with me today. And we hope that that Table of Honor will give other veterans the opportunity to connect and experience the spirit of camaraderie, just as these veterans have shown. And if you'd like more information about that, viewers can go to www.tableofhonor.com, and we look forward to that. And I'm also really pleased to announce that Hormel Foods will be donating $5,000 to Operation Gratitude. And this organization, we have deep roots with as well. It's the largest nonprofit in the country for hands-on volunteerism in support of the military, veterans, and the first responders as well. And in 2019, for example, there were more than 1 million volunteers that participated in over 10,000 Operation Gratitude service projects. It's fascinating. And again, if you're interested in that or donating or getting involved with that organization, their website is operationgratitude.com. So gentlemen, I will say on behalf of our country, on behalf of all Hormel Foods employees and on behalf of everyone here, we salute you and we humbly say thank you. Thank you for your sacrifices, for your service, and for being here today and allowing us to be just a small part of your truly amazing story. So thank you very much for being here. And I will tell everybody that's on the line, don't forget to tune in tomorrow. We have another fascinating film tomorrow. It's a 5th grader who fed Putnam County. You will not want to miss that. So gentlemen, I will say thank you once again. And for those that missed today's film, at the beginning of our presentation, here is an encore presentation of Chuck Baker's Table of Honor. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.